Welcome back for another deep dive. AI in cars. That's where we're headed today.
It's a big one.
It is, yeah. It's a huge topic, lots to cover, but we're going to try to break down.
I think it's one of the most exciting areas where AI is having a major impact.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree. And I think, it's something that's going to affect all of us in the pretty near future. Like, I'm not sure when I'm going to buy a self-driving car, but
Coming.
it is coming. Yeah, it is coming. So I guess maybe a good place to start is, like, how is AI already changing the automotive industry? Like, what are some of the things that are happening right now?
Right, so you don't even need a self-driving car to see AI at work. Like, even today, it's already transforming how cars are made. You've got AI being used in manufacturing, like right on the factory floor.
Very interesting.
Yeah, AI can analyze all the data coming off the production line, in real time to help optimize everything. So it's like having this incredibly efficient overseer, making sure everything's running smoothly.
So it's like preventing bottlenecks and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's making production more efficient, reducing waste and all that.
Wow. So AI is like streamlining the whole car building process.
It is, yeah. And it's also being used to help design better cars. Like AI and machine learning algorithms can analyze tons of data about different materials and their properties.
Oh, so like figuring out the best materials to use for different parts of the car.
Exactly. So they can find the optimal materials for things like strength, weight, fuel efficiency, all sorts of things.
So AI is kind of like helping engineers design lighter, stronger, more efficient vehicles.
Yeah, and even like the whole structure of the car.
Yeah.
Like AI can simulate all these different designs and analyze how they'll perform, like aerodynamically and structurally. So it's really changing how cars are designed from the ground up.
That's amazing. So AI is already having a big impact even before we get to the whole self-driving thing.
It is. I mean, self-driving cars get a lot of the attention, and rightfully so.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the big flashy thing, right?
Yeah, but there's a lot more to AI in cars than just autonomous driving. But, of course, that is a huge part of the story.
It is. So maybe we should dive into that a bit. Like, where do things stand with self-driving cars? I know there's all this talk about different levels of automation.
Right, so you've probably heard about the levels of driving automation. There are 6 levels, actually, defined by the Society of Automotive Engineers. They range from no automation at all, which is level 0, up to full automation, where the car can literally drive itself anywhere under any conditions. That's level 5.
Right. So like level 1 and 2, those are the ones that are pretty common in cars today, right? Like
Right.
adaptive cruise control and lane keeping assist and stuff like that.
Exactly. Those are driver assistance systems where the car helps out a bit, but the human's still fully in control.
But when you get to level 4 and 5, that's where the car can pretty much handle most, or even all of the driving.
Right. Level 4 is what we call high automation, where the car can drive itself in certain conditions, like on highways or in certain designated areas. And there are actually some level 4 vehicles being tested out in limited areas today.
That's cool. But level 5, that's still a ways off, right? Like where the car is truly autonomous in any situation.
Exactly. Level 5, full automation, that's still a big challenge. And there are a lot of hurdles that need to be overcome before we get there.
Like what are some of the things that are holding back the development of truly self-driving cars?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is that the real world is really unpredictable. Like a self-driving system has to be able to handle all sorts of crazy situations that might never have been programmed into it, like sudden snowstorms or road closures with confusing detours, or even just like, construction workers directing traffic with hand signals.
Yeah, that's something I hadn't even thought about. Like how would an AI deal with something like that?
That's where things get tricky, and that's where it's so difficult to achieve that level 5 full automation.
So how do you even begin to teach a car to navigate something as complex and unpredictable as the real world?
Well, a big part of it is using these incredible technologies like deep learning, computer vision, and sensor fusion. That's how self-driving cars perceive and make sense of their surroundings.
Okay, break that down for me a bit. Like what exactly is deep learning and how does it apply to cars?
So deep learning is a kind of machine learning. It's like this advanced way for computers to learn from huge amounts of data. And in self-driving cars, deep learning algorithms are used to train the car's computer vision system.
So it's like teaching the car to actually see and interpret the world like a human would.
You could say that, but deep learning goes even further than just recognizing things. It allows the car to understand how those things relate to each other, how they're moving, and how they might interact.
Wow, so it's not just about spotting a pedestrian, it's also about predicting whether that pedestrian might step into the street or something like that.
Precisely. That ability to anticipate and predict is crucial for making safe decisions in a dynamic environment like driving.
So we've got the seeing part covered. But how does the car actually take all that information and decide what to do? Like, is there some kind of central control system that weighs all the options and makes the final call?
Yeah, you could think of it that way. It's like the car has this central brain that's constantly taking in information, processing it, and then making decisions about what to do next.
That is just wild. This is all so fascinating. I can't wait to hear more about how this all works.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more to unpack.
Let's do it.
So, we were talking about the car's brain, how it takes in all this information and decides what to do. And a big part of that decision-making process is something called sensor fusion.
Sensor fusion. Okay, what is that? I haven't heard that term before.
So think about it like this, the car has all these different senses, right? It's got cameras that act like its eyes and radar that can see through fog and darkness and LiDAR that creates a 3D map of its surroundings.
So it's getting input from all these different sources.
Exactly. And sensor fusion basically combines all that data from these different sensors to create this much richer, more detailed understanding of the car's environment.
Oh, okay. So it's like having multiple perspectives on the same thing, which gives you a more complete picture.
Yeah, exactly. It's like having a 360-degree view of the world, with each sensor contributing a different piece of the puzzle. And that's super important for making safe and informed decisions, especially when you're talking about a self-driving car.
Makes sense. But like, how does the car actually use all that data to decide what to do? Is there some kind of central control system that like weighs all the options and picks the best one?
Yeah, you could think of it that way. It's like the car has this sophisticated central computer system that acts as the conductor, you know? Like it takes in all the data from the sensors, processes it through those deep learning algorithms we talked about, and then sends commands to the car's actual mechanical systems, the steering, braking, acceleration, all that.
Oh, wow. So it's like this continuous loop of like sensing, analyzing, deciding, and then acting. It's amazing how all of that happens in real time.
And it happens super fast. I mean, often in milliseconds, because in driving, obviously, timing is everything. You need to react instantly to things.
It's incredible how far this technology has come. But I'm curious, are there situations where even the most advanced self-driving systems might, like, struggle?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely still challenges. Like, remember those edge cases we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Those unusual, unpredictable situations that can trip up even experienced human drivers. Those are still really hard for AI to handle perfectly.
Can you give me, like, an example of a particularly tricky edge case just to kind of illustrate what we're talking about?
Sure. So imagine a scenario where you've got a traffic light that's malfunctioning.
Right.
Like it's displaying conflicting signals. Maybe the red and the green light are both lit up at the same time. Now, a human driver would probably be able to figure out what to do, like they'd use their common sense, look at the other cars, look at the flow of traffic, and make a judgment call.
Right, like use the context to figure it out.
Exactly. But for a self-driving system, that kind of ambiguous situation could be really difficult to interpret. Like, what's the right rule to follow when the rules themselves are contradictory?
That's a really good point. Or like, what about those times when you have to rely on nonverbal cues from other drivers? Like
Brutal.
someone waves you through at an intersection, or you kind of make eye contact with another driver to figure out who goes first.
Right. Exactly. Those kinds of nuanced social interactions are really hard to program into an AI. I mean, the self-driving systems are getting better at recognizing things like hand gestures and whatnot, but they still don't have that same level of intuitive understanding that humans do when it comes to those subtle social cues.
It makes you realize just how complex driving really is. I mean,
Yeah.
we do it every day, but we don't even think about all the little decisions and adjustments we're making constantly.
It's true. And it highlights how important it is to keep working on these self-driving systems, making them more robust, more adaptable so they can handle those really tricky edge cases.
So how do you even test for edge cases? I mean, it seems like it would be impossible to create every possible scenario out on the road.
Yeah, that's the challenge. I mean, real-world testing is obviously important, but it has its limits. That's why engineers are increasingly turning to something called simulation to test these self-driving systems.
Simulation, what does that involve?
So basically, they create these incredibly realistic virtual environments where they can test out all sorts of different driving scenarios. It's like creating a virtual world where the car can experience millions of miles of driving without ever leaving the lab.
Wow, so it's like a video game for self-driving cars.
In a way, yeah. But these simulations are incredibly sophisticated. I mean, they use really powerful computers to mimic all sorts of real-world conditions, traffic patterns, weather, pedestrian behavior, all sorts of things.
So they can throw anything at the car, basically, and see how it reacts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it allows them to test those edge cases that would be really difficult or even dangerous to replicate in the real world.
That's a really smart approach.
Yeah.
So they can really put the AI through its paces in this virtual world.
Yeah, and they can do it much more efficiently than they could with real-world testing.
So it sounds like simulation is a key tool for developing these self-driving systems and making sure they're ready for the complexities of the real world.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much goes into all of this.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's really cutting-edge stuff. And it's not just about the technology itself, but also about the people who are developing it and testing it and making sure it's safe and reliable.
Right, because ultimately it's still humans who are responsible for this technology.
That's a really important point. And it leads us to another important aspect of AI in cars, the human factor, like how humans and AI interact with each other in this whole self-driving equation.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we've been talking a lot about the technology, but we can't forget about the human element. After all, these cars are being designed for people to use.
Exactly. And that brings up all sorts of interesting questions about trust and safety and how we design these systems to be intuitive and easy for humans to understand.
Okay, let's dive into that. Like, how do we make sure that humans and AI can work together effectively when it comes to driving?
So yeah, it's not about AI taking over completely. It's more about finding that balance between human and artificial intelligence.
Right, like a partnership.
Exactly. Like how can they work together, because driving is so complex, we can't just expect AI to handle everything perfectly right from the start.
Yeah, for sure. So how do we make sure that this human AI team actually works well together?
I think one of the biggest things is designing these systems so they're intuitive. Like the average person can understand how to use them.
Right, it needs to be user-friendly.
Exactly. Like the interface between the car and the driver
Mm.
needs to be super clear. The car needs to be able to communicate effectively with the human.
So it's not enough for the AI to just be smart. It also needs to be a good communicator.
Yeah, exactly. Like the driver needs to know what the car is doing and why it's doing it.
Mhm.
They need to be able to trust the system.
Trust is huge.
Right.
Yeah. But how do you build trust between a human and a machine? Like, especially when that machine is in control of a 2-ton vehicle going 70 miles an hour.
Transparency, I think, is key. Like the system needs to be able to explain its decisions in a way that the human can understand.
So if the car suddenly slams on the brakes, the driver should be able to see why it did that.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like having a co-pilot, that can explain what they're doing and why.
I like that analogy. It's like, hey, just so you know, I'm braking hard here because there's a deer that just ran out into the road.
Right, exactly. And that kind of transparency really helps build trust over time.
Yeah, because then it's not just this mysterious black box making decisions.
Yeah,
You actually start to understand how it works and why it's doing what it's doing.
right. And the more you understand it, the more you can trust it.
Makes sense. But what about those situations where the human actually does need to take over control? Like, how do you ensure that that transition is smooth and safe?
That's another really important design consideration, Like that handover process needs to be seamless and intuitive.
So, like, the car should give you clear signals that it's time to take the wheel.
Exactly. Like maybe there are audio and visual cues, like
Yeah.
a voice saying, please take control of the vehicle, and a warning light flashing on the dashboard.
Right, and maybe even like a haptic feedback thing where the steering wheel starts vibrating or something.
Yeah, exactly. So, you need to pay attention and take care.
It seems like there's so much thought going into designing these systems to make sure they're safe and user-friendly, like really thinking about the human experience.
Yeah, definitely. Because at the end of the day, these cars are being designed for people to use, so the human factor is absolutely crucial.
And it's not just about the individual driver either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need to think about how AI in cars will impact society as a whole.
For sure. Like there are all these broader implications to consider. Like you mentioned, the potential impact on jobs.
Yeah, what happens to all the truck drivers and taxi drivers if self-driving vehicles become widespread?
Right. That's a huge question that we need to be thinking about. And it's not just about jobs either. Like there are ethical questions too.
Like what?
Well, like how do we program these cars to make moral decisions? Like if an accident is unavoidable, how does the car decide who to protect? Those are really tough questions that we as a society need to grapple with.
That's some deep stuff. Really makes you think.
Yeah, it's complex, and it's something we're going to need to continue to discuss and debate as this technology evolves.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. It's been fascinating to explore all the different facets of this topic,
Mhm.
from the technical stuff to the human element to the broader societal implications.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how much progress has been made in such a short time.
It is. I'm leaving this conversation feeling both really excited about the future of AI in cars and also kind of humbled by all the challenges that still lie ahead. You know,
I feel the same way. It's definitely an area where we need to proceed with caution and make sure we're thinking about all the potential consequences.
absolutely. But that's what makes it so interesting to talk about, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's not just a simple black and white issue.
Yeah, it's full of nuance and complexity.
And that's why we love doing these deep dives,
Yeah,
to really explore these complex topics and try to make sense of it all.
absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
It was my pleasure. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.